September 18, 2024. Beirut, Lebanon, 3:27 p.m. local time. Hassan Darwish sits in his apartment in the Daya district, the southern suburbs where Hezbollah controls every street corner. His walkie-talkie sits on the kitchen table, exactly where he left it that morning. It's an ICOM ICV82, beige casing, sturdy design. The kind of device you trust your life with when cell networks are compromised or when you need secure, untraceable communication across militia checkpoints. He reaches for the device. His commander sent a message 30 seconds ago asking for a status update. Hassan's team is responsible for monitoring Israeli drone patterns near the border. Routine work. Boring, even. He picks up the walkie-talkie, feeling its familiar weight in his palm. Across Beirut, in 17 different locations, other Hezbollah operatives are doing the exact same thing. Some are in safe houses, others are walking through markets, a few are sitting in cars near strategic intersections. They all have the same model, ICOM ICV82, standard issue, reliable, secure. Hassan presses the push-to-talk button. For a fraction of a second, nothing happens. Then the lithium battery inside the device receives a signal it was designed to recognize. A cascade of chemical reactions begins. The circuit board, modified years ago in a factory thousands of miles away, completes a pathway that was never supposed to exist. The explosion is instant. The blast radius is small but devastating at close range. Hassan's hand is vaporized. The shockwave tears through his chest and face. He's dead before his body hits the floor. 17 more explosions follow within minutes. Some operatives die instantly. Others lose hands, eyes, parts of their faces. A few manage to throw their devices away just in time, but the concussive force still leaves them bleeding and disoriented. In the chaos that follows, Hezbollah leaders scramble to understand what just happened. Was it an airstrike, a coordinated attack, a breach in their supply chain? None of them realize the truth yet. The walkie-talkies they've been using for nearly a decade, devices they've carried into meetings, into operations, into their own homes, were never just communication tools. They were bombs. Bombs that were built, shipped, distributed, and activated by an intelligence service that had been waiting for the perfect moment to press the button. How did Mossad pull off one of the most patient, surgically precise supply chain infiltration operations in modern espionage history? How do you turn thousands of ordinary devices into weapons and wait 10 years to use them? And what does this operation reveal about the invisible battlefield where intelligence agencies fight wars most people never see? To understand this operation, you have to go back to the early 2010s. Hezbollah, by this point, was no longer just a militia. It had evolved into a highly organized paramilitary force with sophisticated intelligence capabilities, funded and trained by Iran. They controlled southern Lebanon, fought in Syria alongside Assad's forces, and maintained a constant shadow war with Israel along the border. But Hezbollah had one massive vulnerability: communication. Every phone call, every text message, every email could be intercepted by Israeli signals intelligence. Unit 8200, Israel's equivalent of the NSA, was constantly monitoring Lebanese networks, tracking movements, identifying operatives, and building target lists. Hezbollah knew this, so they adapted. They stopped using cell phones for sensitive operations. Instead, they turned to older, more secure technology, walkie-talkies and pagers. These devices operate on radio frequencies that are harder to intercept and nearly impossible to trace back to specific individuals. No GPS, no metadata, no digital fingerprint. For Mossad, this created a serious problem. Hezbollah operatives could now coordinate attacks, move weapons, and plan operations without leaving any electronic trail. Israeli intelligence could still track movements on the ground, but they had lost one of their most valuable assets: real-time communication intercepts. Mossad needed a new approach. They couldn't just hack the devices. Walkie-talkies don't have operating systems or software vulnerabilities to exploit. They're hardware. Simple, dumb, reliable hardware. So, Mossad made a decision. If they couldn't intercept Hezbollah's communications, They would become part of the supply chain. They would build the devices themselves. This wasn't about gathering intelligence. This was about creating a weapon that could be activated years later, when the timing was right. A weapon that Hezbollah would carry willingly, trust completely, and never suspect. The operation required patience. It required building an entire front company that could manufacture legitimate communication devices, distribute them through normal commercial channels, and ensure that Hezbollah would choose them over every other option on the market. And it required absolute secrecy. If anyone inside Hezbollah's procurement network discovered the tampering, the entire operation would collapse. Worse, it would expose Mossad's methods and burn any future opportunity to use supply chain infiltration as a weapon. But the payoff was worth the risk. If Mossad could pull this off, they would have the ability to strike Hezbollah's operational network at will, anywhere in Lebanon, without deploying a single agent on the ground. The planning phase began in 2013. It would take years to execute. The first challenge was the device itself. Mossad couldn't just take an existing walkie-talkie model and add explosives. The modification had to be invisible. The device had to function exactly like a normal ICOM ICV-82. It had to pass routine inspections. It had to be used daily by Hezbollah operatives without raising any suspicion. Israeli engineers worked in complete isolation, reportedly at a facility linked to Unit 8200 and Mossad's technical division. They disassembled genuine ICOM walkie-talkies and studied every component. The goal was to identify where they could hide an explosive charge without compromising the device's functionality. The solution was elegant. They replaced the standard lithium battery with a modified version that contained a small amount of PETN, a military-grade plastic explosive. PETN is stable, undetectable by standard scanning equipment, and powerful enough to cause catastrophic damage at close range. The explosive was molded into a thin layer inside the battery casing, hidden beneath functional battery cells. The circuit board was also modified. A new component was added, designed to receive a specific radio signal. When that signal was transmitted, it would trigger a spark inside the battery, igniting the PETN. The modification was so small, so seamlessly integrated, that even experienced technicians would struggle to spot it without disassembling the entire device. But having the technology wasn't enough. Mossad needed Hezbollah to actually buy these devices, and they needed to do it in a way that felt organic or legitimate and completely untraceable back to Israeli intelligence. This is where the operation became a masterclass in deception. Mossad created a front company. The exact details remain classified, but intelligence sources suggest the company operated out of Europe, possibly Hungary or Bulgaria, with ties to legitimate electronics distributors in the Middle East. The company didn't just sell walkie-talkies. It sold a range of communication equipment, some modified, some completely genuine. This was critical. If every device the company sold turned out to be weaponized, it would be obvious. Instead, the modified devices were mixed in with normal inventory, creating plausible deniability and making detection nearly impossible. The company built relationships with distributors in Lebanon. It offered competitive pricing. It provided reliable customer service. It became a trusted name in the regional market. And when Hezbollah's procurement officers started looking for secure communication devices, the modified ICOM walkie-talkies were right there, available, affordable, and indistinguishable from the real thing. Hezbollah bought them, hundreds, possibly thousands, over the course of several years. The devices were distributed across the organization: field operatives, mid-level commanders, logistics coordinators, security teams. Every single one of them was carrying a bomb, waiting for a signal that might never come. For nearly a decade, Mossad did nothing. The devices sat in pockets, on desks, in safe houses, in cars. Hezbollah operatives used them daily. They trusted them. They became part of the operational infrastructure. But inside Mossad, the operation was a ticking clock. Every day the devices remained in circulation was another day the secret could be exposed. All it would take was one device falling into the wrong hands. One curious technician disassembling a battery. One Hezbollah counterintelligence officer getting suspicious about the supply chain. There were close calls. Intelligence analysts later suggested that Hezbollah's security apparatus did conduct occasional sweeps of their equipment, looking for bugs or tracking devices, but they were looking for the wrong thing. They were scanning for transmitters, for GPS chips, for any sign that the devices were being used to monitor them. They never thought to check if the devices themselves were weapons. Mossad, meanwhile, was constantly refining the activation mechanism. They needed to ensure that when the time came, the signal would reach every device simultaneously. This required precise knowledge of where the devices were located, which frequencies they operated on, and how to bypass any potential interference. The operation also had a psychological component. Mossad wanted Hezbollah to feel completely secure with these devices, so they never used them for surveillance. They never intercepted communications. They let Hezbollah believe their operational security was intact. This was the genius of the operation. Hezbollah thought they had outsmarted Israeli intelligence by abandoning cell phones. They thought they were invisible, and that confidence made them careless. By 2024, tensions between Israel and Hezbollah were escalating. Cross-border skirmishes were increasing. Hezbollah was stockpiling precision-guided missiles, reportedly with Iranian assistance. Israeli intelligence knew that a larger conflict was becoming inevitable, and that's when Mossad made the decision. After nearly 10 years of patience, after years of keeping the operation secret even from most of the Israeli government, they decided it was time to activate the devices. But there was one final complication. One day before the planned activation, Hezbollah's leadership reportedly became suspicious. Sources suggest they had received intelligence, possibly from an allied service or an informant, that something was wrong with their communication equipment. Hezbollah issued an order. All operatives were to inspect their devices and report any anomalies. Some units were told to stop using the walkie-talkies entirely until further notice. Mossad had a choice: wait and risk the entire operation being discovered, or activate immediately, even if it meant hitting fewer targets than planned. They chose to strike. September 18, 2024. 3:30 p.m. The signal was transmitted across Lebanon. The explosions weren't simultaneous, but they were close. Within a 5-minute window, dozens of Hezbollah operatives were hit. Some were in their homes, others were in vehicles. A few were in public spaces, which created additional casualties among bystanders. The immediate death toll was lower than it could have been. Many operatives had already stopped carrying the devices after the warning went out. Others were far enough from the walkie-talkie when it detonated that they survived, though often with catastrophic injuries. But the operational impact was devastating. Hezbollah's communication network collapsed. Operatives who survived were too injured to function. Others went into hiding, terrified that any device they touched might explode. The organization's entire command structure was thrown into chaos. For Mossad, the operation achieved its primary objective, disrupting Hezbollah's ability to coordinate attacks. But it also sent a message. It demonstrated that Israeli intelligence could reach into the heart of Hezbollah's infrastructure, anywhere in Lebanon, without deploying a single agent on the ground. The secondary explosions came the next day. Reports suggest Mossad had also compromised pagers used by Hezbollah's medical and logistics teams. These devices detonated in a separate wave of attacks, further crippling the organization's ability to respond. Hezbollah's leadership went into crisis mode. They launched an internal investigation, trying to figure out how the devices had been compromised. They questioned suppliers. They interrogated technicians. They tore apart every piece of communication equipment they had. But by then, it didn't matter. The damage was done. Mossad had achieved something that most intelligence agencies only dream of: a surgical strike that required no soldiers, no airstrikes, no physical presence on enemy territory. It was espionage at its most ruthless and efficient. In the weeks following the operation, the full scope of what Mossad had done began to emerge. Intelligence analysts confirmed that the walkie-talkies had been in circulation for nearly a decade. This wasn't a short-term infiltration. This was a long-game operation that required extraordinary patience and discipline. The operation forced every intelligence service in the world to rethink supply chain security. If Mossad could weaponize communication devices and wait 10 years to activate them, what else had they compromised? What other devices were sitting in warehouses, in armories, in command centers, waiting for a signal? For Hezbollah, the impact went beyond casualties. It shattered their confidence in their own operational security. They couldn't trust their equipment, they couldn't trust their suppliers, they couldn't even trust devices they had been using safely for years. But the operation also raised serious ethical questions. Mossad had turned ordinary consumer devices into weapons. They had embedded explosives in equipment that could easily end up in civilian hands. The explosions killed and injured people who were not combatants by any legal definition. Israel's position was clear. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization, and its operatives are legitimate military targets. The Walkie-Talkie operation was no different from a drone strike or a targeted assassination. It was a precision weapon used in an ongoing conflict. Critics saw it differently. They argued that weaponizing consumer devices crossed a line. It blurred the distinction between combatants and civilians. It turned everyday objects into potential threats, creating a new kind of fear and uncertainty. There's also the question of precedent. If this tactic becomes normalized, what's to stop other nations or groups from using it? What happens when a hostile intelligence service compromises smartphones, laptops, or medical devices sold to civilians? Mossad's operation was effective. It was creative. It was ruthless. But it also opened a door that may be impossible to close. And that's the legacy of this mission. It wasn't just about taking out Hezbollah operatives. It was about redefining what's possible in covert warfare. It showed that in the world of intelligence, the battlefield isn't just physical territory, it's supply chains, it's trust. It's the assumption that the devices in your pocket are just devices. Mossad demonstrated that with enough patience and technical expertise, any object can become a weapon. Any supply chain can be infiltrated. Any routine transaction can be the beginning of an operation that won't conclude for a decade. This operation proved that intelligence agencies no longer need to rely solely on human agents or military strikes. They can engineer the battlefield itself, embedding threats into the fabric of daily life and activating them when the strategic moment arrives. The psychological impact of this revelation extends far beyond Hezbollah. Every intelligence service, every military organization, every security apparatus in the world now has to question the integrity of their equipment. The laptop you use for classified communications, the radio system your soldiers carry, the medical devices in field hospitals. All of it is potentially compromised. The operation created a new kind of paranoia, one that's entirely justified. It's no longer enough to sweep rooms for bugs or check vehicles for tracking devices. Now you have to question whether the device itself, functioning perfectly, performing exactly as expected, might still be a weapon waiting for a signal. This is psychological warfare at its most insidious. It turns suspicion into a constant state of being. Hassan Darwish never had a chance to question that assumption. He picked up his walkie-talkie, pressed the button, and died instantly. He was one of dozens that day, and the device that killed him had been waiting, patiently, for nearly 10 years. Think about that timeline. For a decade, that walkie-talkie sat dormant. It survived inspections, equipment checks, routine maintenance. It was used thousands of times for legitimate communications. It never failed. It never gave any indication that it was anything other than what it appeared to be. And then, in a fraction of a second, it fulfilled its true purpose. Hassan died not because he made a mistake, not because he was careless, but because someone made a decision years before he even received that device. Someone decided his life would end the moment he pressed that button, and he carried that fate with him every single day without knowing it. If you were running an intelligence service, would you have authorized this operation? If you knew that pressing a button would kill enemy operatives but might also set a precedent that endangers civilians worldwide, would you do it? This is the calculation that intelligence chiefs face in the shadows, away from public scrutiny and legal oversight. On one side of the equation, you have operational effectiveness. The ability to strike your enemies without risking your own operatives, without deploying military assets, without the political fallout of a conventional attack. On the other side, you have the long-term consequences. You've just shown every hostile actor in the world exactly how to weaponize consumer supply chains. You've demonstrated that it's possible, that it works, and that the perpetrator can maintain plausible deniability. You've opened a playbook that others will study, adapt, and eventually use against different targets, possibly including your own citizens. These are the questions that don't have easy answers, but they're the questions that define modern espionage. And they're the questions that make operations like this more than just tactical victories. They're moral tests. They force us to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of covert warfare in an interconnected world where every transaction, every supply chain, every manufactured product is a potential vector for attack. Mossad's walkie-talkie operation succeeded brilliantly by every tactical measure, but its true impact won't be understood for years, possibly decades, as other nations and organizations absorb the lesson and develop their own versions of supply chain infiltration. The genie is out of the bottle. The question now isn't whether this tactic will be used again. The question is who will use it next and whether we'll even know when it happens.